Part 7 of Extracts from a Diary kept by the Reverend R. Burrows during HEKE'S War in the North in 1845. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Tuesday, July the 15th. The remains of Captain Grant and Lieutenant Beattie were interred today in our consecrated burial ground with military honours. The grief of the soldiers present was very apparent, especially of those forming the company of the lieutenant. He was an officer greatly beloved by his men. Wednesday, July the 16th. This morning the Colonel, with about 150 soldiers and 50 of Waka's men, left here to attack a pa situated about 5 miles distant, belonging to Haratua and party. It was well known by the rebels that this visit was to be made. They therefore cleared out of the pa. The only person found in the place was an insane woman, left it was supposed on purpose. Very little spoil was found. Waka's men skirmished with a few of the rebels in the open, and one of them was taken prisoner, but in consideration of what Waka had done a little while before in sending into the Waimate to be attended to by me, a wounded prisoner who belonged to Haratua's tribe, this man was set at liberty. The troops partially destroyed the pa and then returned. Dispatches from Auckland. The two colonels, Despard and Hume, are to leave with the detachment of the 96th, the others to remain for the present, Major Bridge of the 58th to have command. Thursday, July the 17th. The Colonel with the detachment of the 96th left this morning. Our fences are being deliberately broken down and used for firewood. I spoke to the officer in command to try and prevent as much as possible this destruction of property. He promised to do so. We have a flour mill here, driven by water, which is full of wheat. This has been broken into, and small quantities of the wheat taken. As the flour required for the troops is being carted in from the bay, it was suggested that an arrangement might be made with the officer of the commissariat to supply them from the mill. This has been agreed to, and a corporal's guard has been placed in charge of the mill to prevent any further pilfering. Had to look to the starting of the mill for grinding, our European miller having left us in a fright some time before, as described above. A little while, however, will, we hope, be sufficient to teach one of our Maoris to attend to the grinding, etc., under superintendence. Friday, July the 18th. Our flour mill is in full work, and promises to supply for some time the daily ration required for the whole force, thus not only saving the trouble of carting it in from the bay, but providing the men with soft bread daily. Sunday, July the 20th. Native service at 9 a.m, church parade at 11 a.m, and native service again at 4 p.m. Although my journal for the next 2 months contains a large amount of matter, much of it is not such as would be interesting to the general reader. I shall therefore only copy such portions as may be considered either instructive or amusing, or both. Tuesday, July the 22nd. Our settlement is assuming the appearance of a military camp on a small scale. Only in the place of tents, officers and men are housed in 2 large wooden buildings, a large barn, a schoolroom, and several outhouses. All the wounded who were able to be removed have been sent down to the bay on their way to Auckland. We have still in the hospital some 14 or 15. Heke has written a letter to the Governor, couched in more humble language than his last. He asks on what terms peace will be made, tries to justify some of his past acts, says the sacking and burning of Kororareka took place against his orders. The latter concludes with a suggestion that the Governor and he should pray for the pardon of their past sins. This letter was publicly read in the presence of his people before it was given to me to pass it on to Archdeacon Williams, who was to peruse it, if he pleased, and then forward it to Auckland. The letter has been duly sent. Notwithstanding fatigue parties are daily told off and sent out to cart in firewood, our fences and even the shingles of our cowsheds are disappearing fast. I would say here, however, once and for all, that the officers generally, when on duty, do their best to prevent deliberate destruction of property, but we have full proof of the truth of what Dr. Watts wrote long ago, that Satan finds some mischief still for idle hands to do. I could fill a small volume with stories and incidents connected with the daily mischief that is going on, but I presume the camp at the Waimate is not worse than camps generally are under similar circumstances. I now made a hasty visit to Auckland, and saw Governor Fitzroy. His Excellency conversed freely on the contents of HEKE'S letter, asked me if I thought him sincere. Was it so that Kawiti was building another pa? I was shown a document which had been drawn up, containing a series of propositions relative to the forfeiture of land as terms upon which peace would be made. These propositions were forwarded to Heke and Kawiti. It will be seen by and by that they were rejected. Having arranged that Mrs. B. should return home, I left Auckland in a small cutter, leaving her to follow by the first decent vessel. Found on my return that Waka's people, many of whom are in and out of the settlement daily, had been breaking down our outer fences of the farm paddocks, bringing in the material and selling it to the soldiers for firewood, receiving for payments figs of tobacco. On my representing this and other grievances to the officer in command, he quite agreed with me that no natives, either loyal or neutral, should be allowed within the camp, except on business. Major Bridge, learning from me that Mrs. B. was about to return home, decided to send for Mrs. Bridge to join him. I set apart 2 rooms in my own house for her reception. At first the boundaries of the camp were very circumscribed, and a double piquet placed to prevent any of the force going beyond them. After a while, however, the limits were extended, and the officers were allowed to visit the settlements of the neutral natives and Waka's people as far as Maui. The men's bounds were also enlarged. These liberties, pleasing if not profitable to all officers and men, did not tend to lessen my work, add to my peace of mind, or help me in my missionary duties. Gambling was strictly prohibited in the camp, but as the men were allowed outside, it was carried on freely, both among themselves and between them and such natives as could be induced to join. The monotony of camp life was sometimes enlivened a little by reports brought into the camp of Kawiti with some of his people having been seen in the bush near, or that they were preparing for a night attack on the camp, or some such rumours. Upon the strength of these reports, the piquets were strengthened. It may be amusing, if not instructive, to relate 1 or 2 false alarms we had, which disturbed our midnight slumbers. During the day, one of Waka's men had reported that the rebels were actually bent upon a night attack on the camp, and that Kawiti was near at hand with several hundred followers. A treble post was formed, orders given to the outer piquet that in the event of seeing anything of the enemy he should fire and draw into the centre post. One rather dark night the appointed signal was given by an outer piquet, and acting upon orders from headquarters, the officer on duty called out the men, and the whole camp was aroused. The man who had given the alarm was called and questioned as to the grounds upon which he had fired off his rifle. "I saw," he replied, "a Maori in a blanket creeping up towards me. I fired at him and came in." The locality from which the man came was duly traversed, but nothing seen. We retired to rest again. On the morrow a white cow was seen wandering about in the neighbourhood, which had evidently been shot in the eye. We had the poor brute put out of its misery. A week or 2 afterwards a similar alarm was given from the opposite end of the settlement. The like process of mustering the men and examining the author of the alarm was repeated. This man, one of the volunteers, had seen "a parcel of Maoris creeping up towards him, wrapped in blankets." On ascertaining the locality where the man had stated he saw the Maoris in blankets, it occurred to us at once, who knew the spot, that he had mistaken some 8 or 10 large stones which lay about 30 yards from his post for Maoris. We took the man with us to the spot, asked him to place himself in the same position he was in when he made his discovery, and fired off his rifle. He had scarcely done so when he exclaimed, "There they be now! Don't you see them?" He passed over with us to the spot where the stones lay, and then again exclaimed, "Well, I took them stones to be Maoris in blankets." Several other false alarms disturbed the night slumbers of the camp during the latter end of August and the beginning of September. About the middle of September, Colonel Despard returned and resumed command. During his absence the station had been much disfigured by the cutting of trenches, throwing up embankments, etc. He expressed his regret at what had been done, pronounced the labour worse than useless, and asked me where he should first set the men to work to remedy, as far as possible, the mischief done. Parties were at once, therefore, set to work to level the embankments and fill in the trenches. I had to complain to the Colonel of frequent visits of some of the soldiers to my backyard for the purpose of stealing firewood, etc. A corporal's guard was at once placed there, and was kept up night and day until the troops left. The same was done in the case of a clump of very fine puriri trees, which had been a wahitapu, a sacred place, the best and largest of which had been set fire to on a Sunday. In this case the guard was supplied from the company of the men who had been guilty of the act, as their comrade would not inform against them. About the middle of October the troops removed to the bay to wait further orders. The Colonel offered to leave a detachment behind for the protection of the buildings if I thought there was any danger of the rebels coming and destroying them. I declined the offer with thanks. On his departure the Colonel gave me a very kind letter, expressive of his thanks for my attention to his wounded, etc. A few days after the troops left, a party of natives belonging to Heke's tribe came to see me, and, as they expressed it, to tangi (weep) over the Waimate in its dilapidated state. Indeed, scarcely a day passed for some time in which parties from the rebels, Waka's men, or the neutrals, did not pay a visit to our settlement. End of Part 7.